Hello and welcome to another episode of Wave Work Stress Goodbye podcast with me, Luke Richardson. This week's episode is a different take on the previous solo recordings I've done. I've got a guest on called Peter Field for an interview today. Peter has his own book called Lighten Your Load. He's been inducing himself in self-help material for the last decade plus now and has come across something called the three principles, which we're going to together discuss in a great deal of depth. It's nice to have you on the podcast, Peter.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
So we mentioned three principles there. How and when did you come across the three principles personally yourself?
I think it was around the 2015 mark. I was on Michael Neill's email list, and I think that was probably my first introduction to it. Um, but I think what was appealing about the principles per se was that it was so different from all the other sort of self-help material I've been interested in. Um, it was the first one that was quite specific in the sense of it was saying that you're not broken, you don't need fixing. Um, and that was a contrast to all the intervention self-help material that I'd come across. So it got my interest. And then the more I delved into it, um, the more profound I think it was. And as here we are in 2025, and the understanding has been shared all around the world and had significant impacts on lives of people from all different backgrounds, age, etc. So it's certainly different. It's certainly a paradigm shift, I think, from everything I'd been used to before then.
Excellent. And I say I for the benefit of listeners, I know of the principles and I've been around it myself for I'd say about 8.5 years now. And when I first got told about it or first came across it, I wasn't skeptical as such personally, but I'd heard enough to think, this could be something here. And I'd say for the first half of those 8.5 years, I kind of put it on a shelf. And thought that's nice, but it can't be that simple or true. I'll put it there, and then when I need it, I'll come back to it. And as the years went by, I could probably got myself in more trouble than I care to admit. And I'd say it's only been the last 3 or 4 years I've really truly myself deeply got into it and realized how true it actually is.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a tendency when you come across anything new to compare it with what you're familiar with. Um, and obviously, one of the principles is thought, and but it's not thought in the way that other self-help materials talk about thought. We're talking about principles, foundational principles, and in that sense, they're all impersonal, in the same way that gravity is impersonal. It doesn't matter whether you believe in gravity or whether you know about gravity, you're still affected by gravity. So there was a tendency for me personally to think, oh, this is something like what I already know in terms of other self-help material. But the deeper you delve into it's a complete paradigm shift. It's 180 degrees um, in the opposite direction to, if you like, most of the self-help teachings out there. Um, so yeah, I mean, it does. I mean, I don't know what you've shared on previous podcasts, Luke, but the principle is basically it's an inside out process as opposed to an outside in process. And when people first hear that their thoughts and feelings are generated within their own psyche as opposed to circumstances out there, then that's it doesn't look like that. You
Ab-
know,
Absolutely. And as I just said before, it's something that is too simple for people to grasp. And the podcast piece is about, work stress and, helping people to see what you've just described. How would you approach somebody like a work colleague, for instance, who is going through a lot of stress because of, deadlines and um, a huge amount of workload and, you know, a volatile boss? How do you approach someone to kind of explain to them it's not their thinking in not such a insulting way, if that makes sense,
yeah,
if you see what
yeah.
I'm asking?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's got to be a receptivity and an open mind to, be willing to at least listen to what's been said. The invitation is that, look, contrary to everything that we've probably been taught and what appears to us as the case, if I've got a difficult boss and he's shouting at me or whatever, um, it's quite natural that you're going to think that's what's generating my, you know, thoughts and feelings, etc. But I think the invitation is, well, look, are there times when the same boss, is saying things that you don't actually have the same, emotional response? Are there times when, you feel something, whether it's a family member or a work person, you've had a challenge with. Are there times when, in similar situations again, the feeling response is different?
I think we can all definitely say we've had situations like that. And whoever says they haven't is obviously it's lying, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the old adage, sleep on it, etc. But the truth is that, we've all had incidents where, we're quite uptight about something, and then we go to bed and we wake up the following morning, and for whatever reason, the situation is still the same, but the response isn't quite as, agitated.
If I had a pound for every time that's happened to me, I'd probably be a millionaire.
Yeah. So I think the question is just to sort of experiment yourself, because you can't sort of understand this intellectually. It has to be sort of, insight driven. You've got to sort of be able to see. And one thing that helped me was that, I thought of situations where I've been to see a film with somebody. It's just, and we've come out afterwards, and I thought the film was great, and the person I went with to see it said, I didn't find it's a complete waste of money. Well, we're sat side by side, we're watching the same film, and we're having a totally different response. The same could be in a restaurant. You have a similar meal, and you have a different response. So I think you've just got to be curious as to why things like that happen. You're a football fan. You're delighted if Newcastle. But the truth is, if Newcastle lose, the other side, the other supporters are very, very pleased. You're not so pleased, but you're both watching the same match. So I think you've just got to get curious as to why that happens. And as I said, the truth is that even within your own situation on a daily basis, you can have a different reaction to the same set of circumstances, 4 hours later. So,
I-
so that's the invitation, really, to get curious, and people have got to experiment with it. It's not a case of believing what's said. They've got to see it for themselves.
Absolutely. And I was just about to add, I think it's a case of us becoming a bit stupid to it, a bit dumb to it, which is easier said than done when we've been growing up with a lot of concepts, a lot of intellectual learning. People thrive on their intellect to get them through life, where sometimes you need to take a step back away from your intellect
Yeah.
and let the common sense
Particularly
and
with this
wisdom come through.
understanding we have, particularly with this understanding, because there's no techniques or strategies to fall back on. It's an understanding that does the heavy lifting. So, the intellect doesn't help you with this understanding. You've got to be able to, see for yourself. And the more you sort of experiment, if you like, with these situations, and why is it that that person really irritated me yesterday, and yet when I'm listening to them today, they don't. It's the same person. I'm the same person. What's happened there? So we've all had that. We've all had that, Luke. We've all had situations where we felt different about something. The classic. The car. When the car's not running properly, it's a complete wreck. But other times when it's running smoothly or something,
It's a classic.
it's fine.
Yeah,
So we can all relate to that. It's the same car at the end of the day, but it's our thoughts that influence how we feel about it.
we talked about thinking just there in intellect, and I just want to raise the topic about the early years education system and beyond into, going or towards higher education, university, going into a job, etc. Why don't you think this sort of, well, not this sort of understanding, this understanding, this truth is taught from an early age? Is it just an innocent misunderstanding that the people in charge of the education system don't know as well, and that's why it's not being taught? How do you think? What do you think about that?
Well, the principles themselves were discovered by a guy called Sydney Banks way back in 1973. He had an enlightenment experience where he realized that all his unwanted feelings and insecure feelings were generated within by his thoughts. And here we are in 2025, and that's still not the mainstream thinking. Most self-help approaches still work very much on it's life circumstances, it's childhood conditioning, it's genetics, it's all these sorts of things, trauma that cause people's, unwanted feelings, etc. So I think, like anything that is significantly in terms of a paradigm shift, it can take an awful long time before it becomes mainstream thinking. So, 73, 50 odd, nearly 50 odd years. And, it's still not mainstream thinking. But I think, if you look in history, Luke, I think that was the case with many things, whether, with the germ theory, etc. It took
And
decades,
the Earth being flat, another myth as well that got
generation. Yeah,
busted.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
that's right. It took generations sometimes before it becomes accepted by the mass population.
And are you hopeful? As I know you just said, explain it takes a long time to get it. Are you hopeful with more people knowing about this understanding and what we're doing and what's been done before and what will be done by many people to come? Are you hopeful that one day it will become that mainstream thinking?
I think definitely, because I mean, at the end of the day, it's not the principles um, reveal how the human experience is created. So it's a foundational principle like gravity. So it's still working that way, whether you believe it or whether you're aware of it or not. But I think in terms of the sharing of the three principles, I mean, it's got a momentum now that's unstoppable. I think it's probably shared all around the world now. There's literally thousands and thousands of people who have been significantly impacted by it. There's lots of practitioners who are sharing the principles, not only those of the first generation who knew Sydney Banks, but those, in another generation who didn't know him. So I think it's got a momentum, and that's virtually unstoppable. So yes, it'll come, but it's very difficult to know when. What's that saying? There's a saying, isn't there? This is an idea whose time has come. I don't know
Yes.
when that will be, basically.
Yeah. And yourself personally, Peter, you as I mentioned at the start of the podcast, you got your own book. You've been involved in the self-help world for a long time now. What's next on your radar? What are you trying to achieve next to help get this understanding out there to the world?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think one thing about the three principles understanding is that there's no end to the depth of understanding that you can have with it. So, for people who share the three principles, um, there's this term called grounding, which is your own awareness of the three principles and how it's impacted your own life. And you can only really share it from an insightful realization point of view. So, I take great comfort that there's people that have been studying this for 40, 50 years who, are still, excited by the fact that it's an infinite level of understanding that you can get to. So, basically I want to deepen my understanding and obviously share it, because at the end of the day, anything that, you can see has a significant impact on the mental health of somebody, is certainly worth sharing. And the results speak for themselves. People of all sorts of backgrounds with all severity of mental conditions, have found significant, relief and less suffering because of their, introduction to the three principles and their own realization and insights that, it's against all, what appears to be the case, it's generated within the own psyche. And if you know that, thought is the main player here, it's your own thoughts that generate the feelings, and thought by its nature is transient, there's a lot more power given back to the individual than if an individual thinks that the feelings are caused by something outside of themselves, circumstances over which they have little, if any, control. That's a totally different experience to one where, well, actually, hang on here, there's a bit of self-generation here. And the more I understand how the human experience is created, then the more power comes back to the individual, as opposed to, the sort of victim mentality when you can't do anything about it.
Oh, I love that answer. I love what you said also about how you've been doing this for however long you have, and you've only just scratched the surface. Because I can relate to that the same way. As I say, I've known about the three principles understanding for the best part of 8.5 years, and I feel like I've only just dipped a toe
Mm.
in it myself, and that's that's great. It's like it's like a computer game you can never complete.
Yeah, yeah,
That's a
yeah,
great feeling.
yeah.
It just never ends,
No.
and that gives a and for anyone who's suffering out there with stress, anxiety, depression, not just in the workplace but in life in general, this gives people hope, and it's because it's true. It it's always there to tap into, whereas a method, a strategy, it only works for the person who it worked for. Like I
Yeah.
think I remember somebody, I can't remember who it was now, mentioned about I think he was on stage at one point. I think a Three Principles practitioner, I can't remember which one it was, and he was on stage talking to an audience, and he asked this lady, "Would you want to wear my shoes?" And she was like, taken aback by saying, "Well, no, of course I won't want to wear your shoes." It's like, well, why not? He's a size 10's body, and she's what, size 5, what kind of thing. The point he was making was because he had size 10 shoes, because they work for him, they wouldn't work for her. And that's what I think methods and strategies do. They work for the people that they work for, but not necessarily for everybody. And that's where people who are chasing self-help remedies fall short, because they're chasing something that might not work for them or be sustainable for them.
And as I say, the nature of this understanding is that you you deepen your understanding with your own insight. So if I have an insight, it may be very valuable to me, but not necessarily to you.
Absolutely,
But
yes.
the beauty is that, we all have this capacity to have insights. That's part of our makeup, if you like, the design of the human being, that we're all capable of having insights. And we've all probably had aha experiences. They talk about these, in the shower, and if you're going for a walk, etc. We've all had them where things have just seemed to, suddenly made sense out of nowhere.
Exactly that happened to me earlier. Actually, I had a bit of a messy mind this morning, and there was the Sheffield United match was on today, and I just watched that for half an hour before dinner, and lo and behold, my thinking calmed down. But the old me, before coming across the principles, would have said, "Oh, the football's calmed me down," but I
Yeah.
just quieted my own mind internally. That's all that happened. The football was just a byproduct of what was going on, but it wasn't everything. Everything was 100% internal that happened. The shift of
Yeah.
consciousness.
And I think, the other understanding that helps is that, there's this sort of infinite intelligence. We can see it in nature. That, the acorn, always turns into an oak tree. It doesn't turn into an orange tree. With the body, the physical body, you have a cut, then that there's an intelligence there that's going to heal the cut without any sort of conscious effort on our part. There's intelligence that's beating your heart, and it's beating my heart, etc. We don't have to, think, oh, is my heart beating? And so we see it in nature, we see it in the physical side, and it also helps us in the psychological side by, as I say, we're born with resilience. We're born with compassion. We're born with this ability to have insights, And that's all, instrumental in helping you sort of understand something like the three principles. So it's exciting. And as you say, I think the big word is hope. It gives hope to an awful lot of people, because for the first time, you know, they may be moving from this is all outside my control to a deeper understanding of, well, no, actually, it's retained back with you. And if you can understand the nature of the thoughts and how they work, the role of thought, then and you understand how thought is transient and always changing. I don't know what I'm going to be thinking in 5 minutes from now, and no do you. You know, you then sort of understand it at a deeper level, and you think, well, actually, these frightening thoughts I'm having, if I don't indulge in them, and if I let them pass through, I don't know how they calculate this, but it's said that we have something like 50, 60,000 thoughts a day. Well, we don't indulge in all those because we go absolutely crazy.
I think I'd be taking an early night if I was on a 60,000
Yeah,
thoughts a day
but
that I was
the point
grasping
is,
onto.
thoughts are flowing through all the time, aren't they? Thoughts are flowing through all the
Absolutely.
time, you see. So, we don't pay attention to 95% of them because otherwise we go insane. So, the nature of thought is to flow through, and when you understand that, and you understand that not every thought is true, which is a biggie. At one stage, I'm sure I thought every thought was true, but if it was, every time I went past a barking dog, I'd be attacked because that's a thought that runs through my head.
Yeah.
You're going to attack me. So, on a roller coaster, am I going to fall off? All these thoughts we have, but they're not true. So, they look very real, but they're not true. So, it is exciting because I think it's an understanding that, I think it's before its time, but I think it's an understanding that, will, I think, have a bigger audience at some point. But how that happens and when it happens, it's very difficult to say.
That's a wonderful answer, Pete. And I can back it up as well about the natural system, the natural way the system is designed to heal. Because as you know, we're in the UK now, and you might not be able to see on the camera, I've got a cut on my hand there, and it's from the weather getting colder in the UK. And I'm intelligent enough to know that I don't need to worry about this cut because I just know whenever that will happen, whenever it'll happen, it will heal. Whereas where we all fall down is we don't see our psychological system in the same way. We freak out when it's gone into a little bit of um, a little bit of a frenzy, and we want to do something about it. Whereas I know with this cut, I don't have to do anything about it, but I don't see all the time that my mental thinking can work the same way if I just let it do its
Yeah.
thing.
I mean, you've just got a snow globe, haven't you? And that's the great metaphor.
Yeah, yeah,
The who would have thought that, you know, the busy mind, you think, well, what do I do? And you can't think your way out of all these thoughts because you just generated more thoughts. But the metaphor of the snow globe is great because the way it settles is you just let it settle. You shake it, and the way it settles is you don't do anything. You just let it settle, and it's the same with the nature of the mind. Um, so yeah, there is all this sort of intelligence behind the scenes that's working, and we're there's a phrase I quite like, divine engineering. It is quite incredible, the intelligence that is behind nature and the physical body, and the trillions of cells all work in harmony, and all these things going on. So many cells, we lose so many cells in a day, and other cells are replicated, etc. It's actually mind-boggling, the intelligence into the body and nature. The salmon that can swim, thousands of miles upstream to go back to the spawning ground, etc. And and that same intelligence works and supports us psychologically. So it is exciting, and it's a paradigm shift without a shadow of doubt. But it's
I was going to say it sounds like this, what we can see, what we think and feel, is just designed to kind of give special effects into the move of our life. That's
yeah,
all it is. Yeah.
it's and I mean that thought does look real. There's no doubt about it. the special effects department of of the greatest film, it is nothing compared to how our thoughts look real. Consciousness brings it to life through the senses, and it looks absolutely real. But it's the understanding that it isn't. It isn't real because, as I said, every thought isn't true. So it's yeah, it's difficult, Luke, to when you first hear this to get your brain round it because we tend to be, there's a saying, isn't it? I'll see it if we believe it. If we believe it, we'll see it, etc. All this sort of thing. But there's so much that is invisible to us that if someone says, well, it's these circumstances because I can see them. This person shouting at me, um, it's not normal to think, well, actually, that feeling that you have is caused in an invisible realm of your thoughts.
Yes.
And yet, we know that there's things that we can't see with the physical eyes, that we know are there. Radio waves are a classic. Electricity. If you had to see electricity before you pay the bill, then you'd never pay the bill because we can't see it. But there's radio waves, there's infrared that we can't see with the eyes, etc. So I think it's been open to the fact that our senses obviously relate to the outside world, but we're so much more than that. We're so much more than the physical body.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
just to add to what you said about being shouted at, I think for the benefit for the listener, you know, the fact that someone else is in a room, remonstrating and shouting at someone is happening. But the difference being is you could have, if you were the one being shouted at, you could have a zillion experiences of that situation.
Indeed.
You
Yeah.
could not care. You could, want to walk out. You could, want to punch them in punch them in the face. But you could have a lot of experiences, and when you really understand that's the game we're playing here, then it doesn't give you any reason to take it personally. But we do because we get we
Yeah.
get we get um we get seduced into it all the time.
Yes. Yeah. 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 It's, as I said, it's for your listeners that are interested, it's certainly worth looking into. But as I said, I think you've got to inevitably you
Excuse me.
compare it with what you already know. Oh, that's just like this sort of self-help, or it's like that, but it isn't. It is totally different. But the people, or you can say, Luke, is that the people who have you know shared this, they've seen incredible results with the people that they've worked with. So yeah, it's something that is worth investigating. There's no doubt about it.
Excellent. Well, thank you for your time, Peter. Again, it's very appreciated to have you on. Um, so you kind of mentioned what you'll be doing in the future. How can people get hold of you if they wanted to, get in touch with you in the future in terms of what you're doing? Is there an email address or
Yeah, I
are you
mean,
planning on what you're planning
my
on doing?
my email is petefield03@gmail.com, and I'll forward details of my social media
Well, what
accounts.
I can do, that's just reminded me, you saying that what I can do is I always put my own Instagram profile and website, etc. in each episode. So what I'll do is I'll put your stuff in the same
Yeah,
thing as well. So if anyone's interested in seeing what you've got to offer, they can do in the
that's fine, Luke.
in the in the description below. Okay, thank you again, Peter.
My pleasure.
Wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.